Hi, I'm Kellex Nelson, Executive Director of the Resource Conservation District, or RCD, in San Mateo County. At last week's meeting of our Board of Directors, we had a discussion about the drought, about how it is impacting wildlife, agriculture, vulnerable communities, and what the RCD is doing about it. We were asked to record that and provide it for anyone else who might want to see who wasn't able to attend that meeting. And so that is what this presentation is about right now. So it's no surprise or secret that we're in a historic drought right now. Over the past 2 years, rain and snow totals in the parts of the West have been less than 50% of average. And in California, 88% of the land was an extreme or exceptional drought at the end of July, up from only 3% a year ago, according to the US Drought Monitor. Much of the conversation about drought in California is about snowpack in the Sierra Nevada and reservoirs in California that actually have very little to do with much of our district, which is in coastal San Mateo County. Much of that district, particularly in the unincorporated areas, has no water utility, no irrigation district, and does not have any connection to any of those state water projects. So we're expecting this drought to continue and get worse. There's a 70 to 80% chance of a La Nina this winter. We recognize that the coast side has a very different sense of the drought and water supply than other parts of the county. We're seeing large sections of creeks that are dry, like the one that you see in this photo here. And in some cases, stream flows are below the ability of stream gauges to even detect. Groundwater is lower than normal in many places, and some wells are running low or running dry. And for us, we're finding that the drought is cross-cutting across all of our program areas or focus areas. Our support to agriculture, forest health, fire resilience, water quality, habitat. We're finding all of these things to be impacted by the drought. There's a community science drought tracking tool that people can use to enter their observations that is very much for anyone to use, and we'll provide that link to anyone who's interested. Impacts to agriculture that we're seeing. We're seeing farmers fallowing their fields, farmers that are concerned about doing some of the conservation projects that, like conservation planting projects like hedgerows that are beneficial to pollinators or help farms be on the wildland interface, because those practices need water, including things like cover crops that are very beneficial for soil health and all sorts of things. Concerns about cover crop timing, because rains are coming later and the timing of cover crops can compete now with their commercial crops. Ranchers are selling their cattle off early and losing money. They're having to pay to truck water in. They're having to pay to truck in hay and additional feed because there isn't enough forage and grasses. And ponds that provide water for their cattle are drying up. We're also seeing impacts to wildlife. Here, this image, you see another local creek that's drying up. We see wetland habitats that are reduced significantly or completely dry. We've seen, and we keep hearing reports of fish in the creeks, like steelhead trout, that are stranded, and other reasons for fish mortalities. Less freshwater inputs into our lagoons contributes to higher salinity. Lagoons are where fresh and salt water mix, and it's an essential, unique habitat. With the lower freshwater inputs, there's higher salinity. There's also lower dissolved oxygen and higher temperatures, completely altering the habitat for the organisms that are adapted to live there. We're finding that cattle are looking for water and finding their way to creeks more and impacting creeks. Other impacts that we're seeing is where we do water quality monitoring, we're seeing higher bacteria in some creeks. It's kind of a simple calculation here that less water is a higher concentration of the bacteria. We're also expecting first flush to be worse this year. First flush is the first storm of the season that washes all the pollutants that have accumulated across the landscape during the dry season. When the dry season is protracted, more pollutants accumulate during that time. First flush is basically the worst case scenario for water quality in our creeks and beaches. And so we monitor what happens with the outflows into the ocean during that first big rain to get a sense of the worst case scenario of pollution entering the ocean. After a long dry spell, we would expect first flush to be worse, and we'll see this year. Domestic water systems, we know many homes, particularly in the South Coast, that, as I mentioned before, are not part of a utility. They either pump out of a creek or have groundwater or a combination, or maybe ponds. For many of them right now, stream flow is too low for them to actually be able to use their systems to pump water. And also there's impaired water quality in some wells and creek diversions because of the low water. We're also seeing effects on our community cohesion, people who are fighting over water already, people who are calling us to complain about other users, people who make illegal dams in creeks to hold water for themselves and then downstream users aren't getting it. We're seeing this start to happen already and expecting this to get worse. We're also seeing specific impacts to vulnerable communities. Farmers who had been considering building farm labor housing are putting it on hold because of concerns about water. Farms that grow crops for free for people who are unhoused or food insecure have had to scale back their crops because they don't have water and might need to completely stop. Farms that are cutting costs and reducing acreage because they don't have enough water, this results in lost employment opportunities for farm workers. And also, those who are most vulnerable have less access to being able to truck in or purchase water. We have a number of programs and services to try to address this issue. We have a number of programs and projects that are helping agricultural and domestic water users with water conservation, water storage, and water resource management. We develop water management plans for individual and aggregated water users, like small private water companies or mutual water companies or HOAs, that sort of thing. We have been very involved in implementing water recycling, like in greenhouses, where you can capture the tailwater, the irrigation water that comes off greenhouse crops, and reuse it. We help people who wish to dedicate some of their water rights to stream flow temporarily or permanently, so that if they're not using the water or don't need to use it, they can contribute it to the stream without losing their water rights. We have helped install essentially a weather station down in Pescadero to give us high-tech and hyper-local information about water resources and weather. We're involved with a number of stream gauging, stream flow studies, and water resource analyses to identify what water needs are now and projected into the future. Believe it or not, a very big part of conserving water or ensuring that people have water is improving soil health. When you have rich soils, those soils have immensely improved water storage, water holding capacity. And not only is that good for the property owner or the cattle or the wildlife, but also that helps recharge groundwater and helps make sure that creeks have more base flow, that the minimum flow lasts longer into the year. We're also exploring larger water storage opportunities and helping water users to collaborate. We coordinate at local, state, and federal levels across individual water users, small community water systems, mutual water companies. We've helped convene a COSIDE One Water group of entities that are involved with everything from sanitary sewers to water conservation to water supply to water quality. Coordinating with the county, with NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the list goes on. We've also been working on getting eligibility for FEMA funds for the people that we serve, and inclusion in the county's hazard mitigation planning for the programs that we provide. We've been tracking state and federal funding and bringing funds to our district, which is coastal San Mateo County. There's over $1 billion coming to California for resilience related work. And we're partnering with many to try to ensure that those funds, or some of those funds, come to coastal San Mateo County. We work on regulatory efficiencies for environmentally beneficial projects, including the Cutting Green Tape initiative of the California Natural Resources Agency, to try to remove some of the regulatory barriers and find efficiencies and cost efficiencies, time efficiencies, to be able to implement some of those state and federal dollars to get beneficial projects done here. And I should note that what we do not do is we're not able to help with enforcement on illegal activities. We do see and we are aware of illegal activities that people do, and they ask us for help, but we provide technical assistance to help people help the land. And we do not report anyone. We do not take any enforcement actions. So if you're hoping the RCD might help with enforcement, I'm afraid that we're not going to do that. We help people, but we don't report people. The work that we're doing is very challenging. There's a lot of complexity with the projects themselves, the implementation projects. We have to align permitting, public bidding on projects, funding from grants, construction schedules, environmental protection measures when species are migrating, like California red-legged frogs are migrating, et cetera. There's a lot of complexity and cost and time that makes it hard to keep up with the pace of climate change. There is also, we're seeing a significantly increased sensitivity with people talking about their water or even doing these projects because they have concerns about vulnerability or exposure. And even people who have been great conservation partners for many years are prioritizing their water security right now because it's dire. So there are things that we've asked them to do in the past that they've been willing to do, and now they're not feeling that they can. There are also some unexpected things that come up, like a concern that came up a little while back with the assessor's office thinking that environmental enhancement projects are improvements to properties and that properties should be reassessed if they did these. And we were able to navigate that so it's not harmful to people to do things that are environmentally beneficial. There are a lot of challenges with how communities or landowners perceive projects when they see equipment in creeks, heavy equipment. People often assume it's development or will call and report it. Landowners, things might look different when you're doing projects or it might take a while to do. There's a lot of red tape or green tape, as we call it, to get projects done. Another challenge is that there isn't enough information about groundwater and hydrology, particularly in the South Coast, where the geology is very, very fragmented and fractured, and there may be a gushing well within several hundred feet of an area that's completely dry. And there's very little that we actually know about the groundwater profile there. And also there's a challenge of the tragedy of the commons. There are some people who are wondering, why should I conserve water upstream if I know this guy downstream is going to take every drop that I save? So we're really seeing a need for community level, watershed level conservation. We are also keeping our eye on the future with our expectation that the only certainty we have with climate change is uncertainty, and that things are more and more extreme flooding and extreme drought. So our future efforts involve working more across users of water, working towards larger scale and community level solutions, taking bigger, bolder actions that includes large water storage. Difficult conversations with entire communities need to happen. Getting up to scale on overall watershed health so that these watersheds are resilient to climate change, like the habitat restoration and enhancement, wetlands protection, soil health, getting those groundwater studies done, and preparing for drought and flooding at the same time. We're basically engaged in ongoing learning and innovation, recognizing that we need to learn to grow into this new reality. And we're wondering if we're always going to be able to have the win-win scenarios that we've been able to do for the last 80 plus years, and planning for various diverse future scenarios. We're also anticipating increased regulation of stream flow and water resources. And how does our incentive-based work fit into that? So that's a little bit of what we've been thinking about and working on, and we'd love to hear from you. This is my email address. If you have any additional observations of drought that you'd like to share with us, or you have other concerns or priorities that we didn't include in this or we weren't thinking about, if you have comments or questions about our programs or services or requests for help, or if you would like us to know about other programs, services, or resources that we didn't include, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.